So my name is Melrose Stewart. I'm married. I have 3 children. I am a lecturer at the University of Birmingham. I was born in Jamaica and came to the UK in 1965, so I'm one of the Windrush generation. I now have been at the university since 1996, but I've been practicing physiotherapy all of my professional life. I'm an educator. I spent my first few years in practice, and then I decided education was the route I would follow. My career has changed over the years. From practice, I was a student teacher and then became a senior teacher. The NHS changed, and so my career changed with it. Physiotherapy was independent of the university, but in 1996 the course and the school where I was lecturing became part of Birmingham University. Since that time I have done a variety of things. I have maintained a lecturer's role, but I have also become more interested in health promotion. And that's actually become even more important in my later life, because I was approached by Channel 4 TV to be part of a special program looking at intergenerational activities. And the program was about Old People's Home for 4-year-olds. And that has actually taken off. It's launched. I'll stop there. I'll tell you a little bit about my early life. My early years were in Jamaica. I grew up in rural Jamaica from a poor community. My parents were, one was a farmer, and like a lot of Jamaicans, left to go to the States to earn money to support his family. And my father left the States, then came to the UK. My mother worked at the local hospital, ironing for the various, for the public and for the workers at the hospital. So we had very little. We had a 1-bedroom house. I took my children back to Jamaica to show them where I was brought up. I think it came as a bit of a shock that we could actually have the whole family in one room. The kitchen was outside. Bathroom and toilet was outside. So not everyone in Jamaica obviously lived like that. There were lots of divisions in Jamaica, and there was a colour divide. I'm black, and it does mean that the lighter you were, the better you were treated. It was just a matter of fact. So my mother left me age 6 to come to the UK, as a lot of migrant families did. She followed my father to England, and I stayed with my auntie. And I then went to Kingston, again with another auntie, and left Jamaica actually age 11. I left on my 10 and I arrived on my 11th birthday. Overnight I actually arrived on my birthday. So I was age 11 when I came to the UK. It was a strange transition. I was very excited because I was going to see my parents again. I hadn't seen my father since I was 2, and my mother left when I was 6. So to meet them when I was 11 was strange, but you know, that love was still there. I didn't have a problem with that, and I think that was the important thing. We know that when our parents left us, it was to find a better life, and they always kept in touch. It wasn't as easy as it is now, where you could email and send messages in so many ways. It was about letter. And so to see them again was exciting. To leave the Caribbean and to arrive in Manchester, doom and gloom. It was so dismal. I found that really strange. And I remember spending my first few days at school looking out of the window, because it was always so gloomy, and I thought it was going to rain, and it was never that gloomy in Jamaica unless it was going to rain. But you know, the timing for me was actually quite fortunate. I arrived here with my older sister, and at age 11 in the UK, that's when you take the 11 plus. I had no idea about the 11 plus. My parents had no idea about the 11 plus. This was March. and I was registered into the local junior school. And I remember my parents telling me about the headmaster said, oh, get her a green coat, a green gabardine, because I didn't have a coat and she had to buy a coat, and coats are expensive. And so to get a green coat, because that would be the secondary modern school that I would be going to. So my mother bought a green coat. Little did I know that I was taking the 11 plus. No, well, if they told me, I didn't understand what it was about. I took the 11 plus and I passed. And it was to a grammar school. Now this was March. I arrived in March. The 11 plus was in March, and my mother was horrified because she then had to buy a navy blue coat, and that was expensive. She knew nothing about the school system. For me, that was in a way fortunate, because although I didn't know I was taking the 11 plus, I knew I was taking tests. The school system in Jamaica was excellent. In some respects, the maths, the English was very similar to the UK system. I must have been relatively bright. I think I was relatively bright. In school, it was, work hard, so we always did. And so for me, the 11 plus was a landmark opportunity. For me and my parents, it was a challenge. Tennis, they'd never heard about tennis. They had to buy a tennis kit. Hockey, they had to buy a hockey stick. No idea about hockey. In fact, my mother was a seamstress as well. She knew how to sew. She sewed my tennis clothes, which was great. I had to get a cookery basket and all the ingredients had to go in cookery. So the transition from a Jamaican culture to a British culture, age 11, was enormous. It's huge. Not only for me, but for everyone around me and my family. I learned very quickly. I was the second black child in the grammar school. I remember seeing one other black person, and I was so excited. But she was in the sixth form, and she left as soon as I joined the first form. So I was then on my own, the only black child in this school. It did seem strange, and I can't remember overt racism. I am sure it was there, because there are many stories I could tell which actually demonstrated it was there. I think perhaps you shelter yourself. You just get on with learning when you're 11. I remember the children taking the mickey out of my accent. I would say dog instead of dog. And so, there's certain things that they would mimic, but, I just sort of shrugged it off. But I do remember when I was about 14 and wearing an afro. I undid my hair and wore an afro to school. And I remember my geography teacher actually saying to me, I usually sat at the front of the class, and he said to me, "Did you fall out of bed this morning?" I didn't think it was funny. The rest of the class thought it was funny, but I didn't. And I think that was probably the first time I realised, that there was overt racism at play. There may have been others, but you just motor on and you work hard. My parents were like any Jamaican family. They had slogged it to get to the UK. They had spent every penny they had. They didn't have much money. My mother was working in a laundromat, so she was steaming clothes when she came here. My father worked in Raleigh Industries. He was working as a factory worker, working on cyanide. And I remember doing in chemistry that cyanide was poisonous. And I just remember that's what my father uses. They use cyanide to harden bicycles. And I remember one day he ended up in hospital, and he said he'd got some cyanide in his eye or something. So he was rushed to the hospital. And I remember being really scared for my father. But that was my background. My parents just worked long hours. My father would work nights. He would work days as well. But my mother would leave very early in the morning and come back very late at night. Yeah, so I worked hard at school, got my GCSEs. Unfortunately, when I came to my A-levels, I was doing 3 A-levels, chemistry, biology and geography. I became ill, but I was really fortunate. I think fortune was smiling at me because I was offered an unconditional place for physiotherapy. Why did I do physiotherapy? Now, it's quite unusual because I didn't know much about physiotherapy except a friend of mine, when I was in fifth form, said to me she wanted to be a physiotherapist. And I asked her, what is a physiotherapist? And she said, oh, do lots of activity, and you rehabilitate people and get them better. And I thought, that sounds good. The sad thing was, I got offers to all of my 6 choices and she didn't get one. I felt so bad because she'd always wanted to be a physiotherapist. But I got my place and I went to Bristol. So the Bristol School of Physiotherapy is where I trained. I did really well. I got a prize in the first year and the second year. But you know what? I had a knock in my final year. We had exams at 2.5 years. And, you know, we think of ourselves doing really well, but we always, you know, there is failure along the way. We all fail at something. And I had an exam after 2.5 years and coming up to my final year, and I failed that exam. I was absolutely gutted because I was a star pupil up to that point. And I had no choice but to do it again. It meant that I had to add extra 3 months onto my course. But you know what? That extra 3 months taught me so much. It put me in good stead for later on because I grounded myself in practice, and the offer of jobs was there when I'd finished. And at that time, there were lots of opportunities for physiotherapists. I applied for a job in Bristol, I applied for a job in Birmingham, and I was offered both. And I just decided, because I heard from Birmingham first, that I'd come back to Birmingham, and Birmingham is where home was. So I got a job at the QE hospital, and I worked there as a junior physiotherapist. I had my first daughter around that stage, and then I worked as a senior physiotherapist after I had her at what is now Heartlands Hospital. I was working at Heartlands happily as a physiotherapist, and I remember being really excited by having students. I loved learning, I loved having the students. And I remember a teacher coming out from the local physiotherapy school to see the student and just had a relaxed conversation with me about had I thought about teaching. And I said yes, probably in the future, but I was enjoying my practice. And before I knew it, she'd gone back to the principal of the school, who sent me a letter to say, I hear you're interested about teaching. And I thought, oh my goodness, I am interested, but I wasn't thinking that quickly. But the invitation was from a principal who you could not refuse. And so I thought, well, why not go and see and have a discussion. And that's where my teaching career started. I decided, she offered me a place to be a junior teacher. I took it up. I then had to go back to university to do the course for teaching. So I went to Wolverhampton and I did my teacher training there. Then went back into teaching full-time at the QE School of Physiotherapy. And from then on, I just continued with physiotherapy. So teaching, I didn't find actually the delivery of teaching difficult. The preparation took a lot of time because it meant learning a lot, but I enjoyed teaching. So the most important thing for me is that I enjoy what I do. It was hard, but I enjoyed passing on what I knew to future physiotherapists. So for me that was enjoyable. But you know, I guess none of us want to stay still, and my parents, that love of learning and just moving on was always instilled in me. So my next thoughts turned to, well, what do I do next? I'm doing teaching, I'm enjoying it, but what's the next step? And naturally I thought, well, why not a master's? And at that time, it was very important that students began to develop independent learning. So that was right back in, oh gosh, a long time ago, early 90s. And I thought, well, this is something I'm interested in, because I was spending a lot of my time showing students how to learn, when in fact, you know, they could learn a lot of this themselves if they were pointed in the right direction. And it's not like now where you've got so much internet facility that you can just go online, you can Google things, It was never like that. It was about library searching, it was about talking to people, it was about looking at the textbooks. And so for me, Autonomous learning was important, but guiding students how to do it was also important. So I thought that would be the theme of my master's if I could get to do it. And fortunately, I was able to do it. I was funded to do it. The Chartered Society of Physiotherapy helped me to do my master's. And so that was my professional body. And I think engaging with your professional body along as you develop your career is important. Master's took a couple of years. I enjoyed doing that, and in fact learning along the way was good. I tried some of the things that I had learned about in my master's with students, some of it more successful than others. I think I made the assumption that students would want to engage with autonomous learning straight away. Of course not. Students like to be told things. They find it difficult and challenging to go and find things out for themselves. At that time they did, because it was much harder, I think, to access materials. Having completed my master's, I consolidated more teaching, looked at teaching different subjects, and that was also exciting. I did a lot more with my professional body as well. The Chartered Society of Physiotherapy is a professional body for all the physiotherapists within the UK. Today they number 57,000. When I registered, my registration number is 35,000, so you can imagine how long ago that was. But now the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy is about developing professionalism, and I was getting very interested in professional image, but also I recognised that the Chartered Society didn't really focus in on diversity. And for me, because my path was always one of a few, the first in my grammar school, the only one in my grammar school, the only black physio I knew when I started working. And there may have been, I did see one or two others in passing, but certainly wasn't very many. And it was about the same time of equal opportunity. And I remember writing to my professional body and asking about the strategy they have for equal opportunity. And the message I got back was very nebulous. It didn't really mean it. It just told me that actually they didn't really know where I was coming from and the issues that were affecting me. And at the same time, the West Midlands was looking at equality and diversity. So here I was in the West Midlands. Actually, I chaired the first equality and diversity group in the West Midlands, but also I wanted to translate that into my professional body. So here was an opportunity going begging. And I started the first Black and Minority Network group in the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy. Before that, nothing existed. And it was a support group, and it was also a group which I felt could inform policy within the Chartered Society. So that was a small start. But from that, other diverse groups were acknowledged and developed. So we had the disability group, we had the LGBT group, and so that was a springboard for starting looking more in depth at diversity in the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy. Overcoming challenges as I developed as a professional was never something that I was going to rest on my laurels with. I thought, I don't see many people like myself, and climbing the career ladder was something that I wanted to do. I didn't have any mentors to help me get there, and I really didn't know how to do it. So everything I did was about just going with the flow, looking for opportunities, and actually relying on family. And I think that's all we had. Individuals like myself was family who didn't really know how the system worked, but just saying, just go, we're here, we'll support you, but not being able to direct you. And I think that's how things are going to change, I hope, in the future, that we're building a network which is going to be able to support our youngsters now. We didn't have that opportunity. So for me, developing professionally, I tried to join the various societies, the various committees, and have a voice. And I think that only came from the sort of person I was and the passions that I had. I was passionate about physiotherapy. It was something that I saw could really change lives. It was about rehabilitation. I saw my patients who could do very little, and I knew that I made a difference in their lives with their motivation to get better. So for me, physiotherapy has always been a passion, will always be a passion, because it's important for me. As far as education, I saw that as fundamental. There is no way I felt I could progress without moving my education forwards, moving the education of others forwards. And also to influence, I felt I had to be part of the committees in my professional body, because although you might be talking the talk, unless you can influence the development of policy, I didn't think my voice would be heard. The opportunity came for me to be one of the vice presidents of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy. I had been part and parcel of many of the committees up to that point, and it was an electoral system, so people had to vote for you. So again, you put yourself on the line, really, put forward what you have done, the difference you feel you could make, and how you see the future. And with that in mind, I put myself forwards, and I was fortunate to be voted as one of the vice presidents. I felt very proud, because I was proud of my profession, and I was proud that I was able to demonstrate with what I'd done to that date, up to date, to the rest of my peers. I was just as proud when I went for a second term, and I was voted on again. So that sort of endorsed that, I could be a voice in my profession, and that's what I always wanted to be. So physiotherapy, when I decided I wanted to be a physiotherapist, I wasn't quite sure what it was about, but I soon learned just how important it was. So today physiotherapists are practicing, and what physiotherapy is all about improving quality of movement. So if someone is breathing and can do nothing else, physiotherapy is important, because to breathe you have to have effective movement of your rib cage, your heart, everything has to be in tune. So it's all about rehabilitation and health promotion, ensuring that whatever movement you have, you can get the best quality of movement. So that takes you from the most basic movement. For instance, people who've had strokes, they probably lose movement of all of one side. Physiotherapy may not be able to bring all of that movement back, because there may be permanent damage in the brain, and with permanent damage sometimes you can't make good, but for whatever's left of that person you can maximize their movement. So whatever pathology, whatever condition that affects a human being, physiotherapy is looking for that potential to improve. So be it your elite athletes who is at the height of their career and want to move on, you'll see a physiotherapist there. Someone who's just starting out, a baby, so pediatrics, adolescents, older people. My interests over the years have veered towards health promotion, and in particularly more recently with older people. So as my career has progressed, I've become more and more focused on health promotion, because I can see that we have been excellent as physiotherapists in rehabilitating people, but the next part of, okay, so when people are well, what do we do in terms of making them even better, even fitter? But also there's a group of people who are not looking after themselves. The NHS is under pressure. A lot of people don't know how to look after themselves. And so I have concentrated on exercising health promotion and how we take that forwards. I built a module around that, and students engaged with that and found it really helpful. Now I, as part of just sending the message out, was interested in dissemination, and I wasn't quite sure how best to disseminate to a wider public. And I was fortunate enough to hear about a BBC Expert Voices scheme. And this was the BBC now looking for diversity amongst people who are in the media, and they invited the university to put people forwards who were experts in their fields. I didn't consider myself an expert in the field as such. I never do, but you have experience in a certain area that other people don't. And so I thought, oh, that sounds like a good idea. Expert voices and health promotion. That's what the message I want to get out. So I went for the day, expert voices, and learned so much. And I will thank the BBC for that, because they gave me insight into radio and television for a day. There were a group of us, quite a few of us, and we found the day really helpful. And from that, I think a database was developed, and the BBC has a database of the expert voice team. And I think it was that platform, actually, that triggered the next phase. What I'm thinking now is probably going to be the next part of my career. My role as a physiotherapist in Old People's Home for 4-year-olds was to take baseline measurements of the older people to see whether, if we introduced the 4-year-olds over 6 weeks, we could make a difference. And I did feel that we could make a difference. So the baseline measurements that I took were things like a timed up and go step. So a time, how long it took for an older person to get up from their chair, walk 3 meters and sit back down again. I would check their grip strength, because grip strength is an indication of general body strength. We also checked their depression score, and most of them were registered as depressed. And for all of these measures, we looked at them again at the halfway stage, and there was a massive improvement. At the end stage, huge improvements. We had older people of the 4-year-olds doing a sports day. Now that would have been unheard of in this residential home, and yet there they were, racing each other with their 4-year-old down the lawns of the residential setting. So for me, that was real fulfillment of demonstrating, in fact worldwide now, I'm just amazed how far this program has gone, that physiotherapy, not just physiotherapy, but engaging older people in activity can make a huge difference. And not only for the older people, but it had the reciprocal benefit for the youngsters, because the children got their own time with the older people. They were able to learn from them. They had special time where they had a one-to-one, which is what children adore. They could share stories, they could sing songs, they could eat together. So all of the pluses, I couldn't see that there were ever going to be any downsides to this project. And I am amazed, and I'm still taken aback at the success of the programme, because it was also BAFTA nominated. I couldn't believe that this programme had a BAFTA nomination. And at this moment in my career, when I was thinking perhaps winding down, it looks like it's just going to take off in another direction, and that's fantastic. I have no qualms at all, and I will continue with the health promotion message in whatever sphere it takes. But this tells me that your career sometimes is unpredictable. You can plan, and I did plan some of it. I planned to be a physiotherapist. I did plan to do my master's. I did look at the direction to do my PhD. I did look at scoping out how I could engage with my professional body and how I could join all of the committees or some of the committees and how I could make a difference. I did look at diversity around my community and how I could make sure that my profession engaged and was meaningful. Everything I did was about meaning. It had to be authentic. I was always going to be me. I was always going to be a physiotherapist. I'm a Jamaican physiotherapist. It was going to need to have that connection with my community. But I didn't predict the TV career, not at all. That has just happened. And I think you build whatever career you wish, but always look for the opportunities as well. And although I was hesitant about some of the TV stuff because that wasn't what, I'm not a TV personality, but the message was more important. And because the message was more important, I would go with that. I'm happy to go with that. And so who knows what comes next. Right, so in terms of the support I've had through my career, Difficult to pinpoint. My partner and husband has been my driving force and my support throughout. My parents, well, I think I owe them my life basically, and they would always be there, not understanding the system, not knowing the system, but just saying, that's what you need to do. We'll support you. So family is huge. Extended family, also important, but they're not near enough to be able to guide you. There were no mentors in my workplace for me. I never felt that anyone was mapping or helping me to map a career path. And that was quite difficult. I have had, like many people do, go for promotion and don't get it for whatever reason. I felt sometimes the actual driving forces to do that has always had to come from within, and goalposts change or they move. You get there and they suddenly move for whatever reason. But I felt that through my career, that you go for something not quite there and the goalposts change. Now, you know, for me, that's never stopped me going on. I have applied for posts and not got them, that happens, but I've always found an avenue. It's almost like a tributary, that you always look, if something blocks you, go around it. It's never going to stop me, it never will, because there are always things that I'm interested in going for. Now I know that people around me will say, you know, sometimes you should fight, knock that wall down. And it takes a certain kind of person to keep hitting themselves against a brick wall and fighting the system. And I'm not saying people shouldn't do that, because that's how you break down walls for people coming behind you. Sometimes you have to make the decision whether you're going to keep hitting that wall, or whether you're going to hit that wall as well as go around it, or go around it and avoid the wall. Whatever challenge you take, I think it depends on you as a person. For me and my children, I've tried to instill in them that work is the only way you're going to go forward. You can't get by without working. I think my son would probably say you can find the easy options around it. But you know, the easy options are still about work, but you're playing to your strengths. And I think that's what we have to do. And I think we have to find people, and I didn't have it, but I know that it's important, because if I'd got guidance earlier on in my career, I think I would probably have done things differently and got to some points quicker. And I think that is important. And for my children, I have helped them to steer. I've talked about a 5-year plan. There's a 5-year plan. They don't think about a 5-year plan. I haven't even thought next year, they will say. But you know what? We know that you don't become a chief exec without having the support behind you. You don't become president without having a trajectory and having people support you along the way. So whatever challenges there are, I think you've got to know yourself, learn about yourself, find the people who you know have your interest at heart. This is something I learned late in life, that you soon know the people who want you to move up and onwards. I didn't recognise just how important that was, because yes, you'd get lots of excuses and that can't because of this and that. The people who got me forwards was, hi Mel, have you thought about this? This is how you might get there. This is what you might do. Because they're the people who are giving you the next steps to move onwards. The people who don't do that are the people who are saying, but that's difficult, that's that. You may have to do that. You listen, but look for that step up, and it's the step up that's going to get you there. So challenges, yes, I've had many. I've had many knocks, I've had many failures, I've had many people block me, I've had people promote me, and I found those later in life, and now I can identify them easier. I know myself better, I know where I want to be, where I want to go, but there's still a lot to learn, and you can never exist in a vacuum. You might see things, but you have one perception, and that one perception is you. The people around you give you a wider perspective, greater perspective, and they will also help to channel you and guide you, but you need to recognise the positive forces in your life. I know how difficult it is for black children still, and although I will still hear children tell me, oh, but there's no racism, they don't meet it, there is still an issue around colour. There is still an issue about the networks people like myself didn't have, and which we can build for the children coming after us. What I would say to every youngster, I have grandchildren, and I can see that already they have their strengths. My children are working towards their strengths, and for those who don't like school, don't like working, I'll never give up on those children. I went into education because I know that everyone is reachable. I know everyone can learn. It doesn't matter what, and I'll always believe that. It's so important that we, as mentors, as parents, tap into that. But children, find the people you can talk to. You know, I think all children should connect. And unfortunately, sometimes those connections are not as positive as they should be, because the connections you make are sometimes the ones that are weakening you as a person, not building the strength that you need. And we need more mentors to identify with those children. There's never going to be enough of us, but we need to keep an eye out. And the other children also see it as well. And we have to work from all angles to ensure that children from whatever age are steered. And when they go off the rail, when children go off the rail, never give up on them. Never give up on them, because they can be steered back again. So for me, education is fundamental. No matter where you are on your education journey, you can grow.